You are now listening to the Go Getter Showcase, a weekly podcast that highlights professional and entrepreneurial women from various industries in all walks of life. I'm your host, Lindsay Joseph. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful, magnificent, marvelous day. And I'm so excited that this is our very first interview with season 2 of our Go Getter Showcase. And it's been on hiatus for quite some time simply because last year I had so much going on. At the time that I ended the season, I was traveling back and forth between Savannah, Georgia, and Massachusetts, my hometown. And because of that, it was just way too much to be able to record. So when I was planning on getting settled in Savannah and not really having to do as much traveling, I up and left Savannah, ended up staying with a cousin in North Carolina for quite a bit of time. And then I ended up getting my own place in Atlanta. When I was getting my own place in Atlanta, it was around the time that I was preparing for composition exams for my PhD program. And so it's just been a delay. It's been hard getting in the groove of things. There's just been a lot going on. But we are back, and we are back with some really amazing guests this season. And so the very first guest that I have for you is a Miss Shunda Clark Smith. She is an author, a mom, wife, sister, and friend with a passion for helping women grow spiritually while trying to balance their everyday life. Through her platform, Women with Balance, she inspires people weekly via her videos, inspirational posts, and love of God, travel, and fashion on her blog and on Instagram. As her business continues to expand, her goal is to continue to inspire women around the world via her blog, books, and conferences. In this episode, we discuss a lot of things with Shunda, including losing her passion for her nursing career after 12 years and starting Women with Balance, how loss, abuse, and isolation inspired her to finally begin truly walking in her calling and to start her platform, how she's been able to grow her online presence to nearly 20,000 members across Instagram and Facebook in a little over 6 months, and reestablishing her relationship with God, which allows her to balance all of the things in her life. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a registered nurse by day, mommy and wife as well. Along with that, I'm also an author, a speaker, and I just launched a tour for a book I just wrote, Clarity, Beauty, and Pain.
Great. So tell us a little bit about the beginning of your career because, it seems as though you have quite a bit going on. So tell us about becoming a nurse, and was that your first career? And kind of how has your career transformed as a nurse over time?
Well, I've been a nurse now for 12 years. It was actually my very first career. I went back to nursing school when I was 26 years old, right after I got married. Prior to that, I was in call center. I was like an operations manager over a collection center, and it just wasn't my calling. I knew it wasn't. It was just basically something to pay the bills, to be honest. And then I realized that I was really interested in the medical side and decided to go to nursing school at first to be an LVN. I was an LVN for 10 years. And then I went back to nursing school and got my RN. And so now I've been an RN now almost 3 years, actually. And then basically I kind of hit a block. I've done just about everything you can think of as far as nursing, all kinds of different departments. I'm now a corporate nurse, and I just don't have the same passion for it that I used to. Nursing is very political, and a lot of people don't realize that you don't just get to help the patients like you imagine and think that you can. It's not like Grey's Anatomy. It's it's a total different situation. And so I've always known that I had a calling on my life and that I was supposed to be speaking to and empowering women. It's just something I kind of ran from or strayed from because I didn't feel like I was a household name, and that I felt like God couldn't use me, to be honest, that I had gone through too many things, that it was kind of too late. So basically, Last year I lost both my parents and had something really tragic happen to my daughter, and it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that time is very fleeting. So I decided I wanted to walk in my calling, which then produced Women with Balance. Women with Balance was initiated in, I want to say, the end of November. Yes, because it was right after Thanksgiving of last year. And it kind of just blew my mind and blossomed from there. I created the website. Then the next thing I knew, I was creating a clothing line, and then became an influencer on Instagram. And it's just kind of been flowing from there. And I decided to launch this tour to promote the book, as well as really get to speak and empower women like I want to. So that's kind of where I've ended up.
Awesome. So yeah, like I said in the beginning, like there's a lot to unpack there. So let's go back to like your nursing career for a moment. Now, one of the things that you said that's really interesting is that when you said that you transitioned from the call center into becoming a nurse, you said that that was more so like your calling and you had been doing that for years. So what was that calling or that kind of like epiphany that this is what you're supposed to be doing? What was that moment like? And like you said, you were also an LPN for quite some time. So talk about, the transition from being an LPN to an RN.
LVNs are we're subjected to what everyone else is doing. We pretty much can't do anything unless an RN tells us to do it, and your career is very limited. You can't really advance other than being a floor nurse, basically. So that was the reason I went and got my RN, because I wanted to be able to advance in my career. So I found out I was good at auditing. So I began auditing charts and things like that. And that's how I ended up in the corporate world as an RN. And that's kind of where it was at. But to be honest, that's just when I realized I wasn't as passionate about it. It's just not where I want to be anymore. It fit the season that I was in. It's been a great way to support my family. So that's pretty much why I've been doing it. And right now it's kind of I'm just doing it just to be doing it at this point. I'm more passionate about Women with Balance.
Got it. So yeah, my mom was actually an RN for like 25 years. And, one of the things, I'm originally from Massachusetts, and even though I had been living in Georgia at the time, I did vote in the Massachusetts election last year. And one of the biggest questions was about, it was a nursing question. It was about, limiting the amount of patients that a nurse can be assigned to. And it just like blew my mind that why is the public deciding on this when this is something that most of us don't have to deal with? Like this is, and that is when I always knew that hospitals were kind of bureaucratic, by the nature of, they have to be, because you're liable for people's lives, and you're there to help make sure that some people aren't dying, and you're there to make sure that people aren't getting sicker. You're there to make sure that you're controlling possible diseases that could spread on a unit. There's a lot that goes into there. And so I can understand the bureaucracy, but for me, it was almost like these are the people who are running the hospital and the experts, and they can't figure this out. Why should just regular people who have nothing and no stake in this matter be making that decision? And so it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that nursing and the medical field is really probably just like the education system, where it has all these flaws because it's not about putting the people that they're there to serve first. It's about, there's a lot of money in it. There's a lot of other things about it that aren't necessarily, that can kind of take away from the human aspect of it, which is really what it's there to serve. So I can understand how, after getting a little bit more on the administrative side of things, that you can kind of lose that passion for it. So tell me a little bit about, starting with balance. You said that you had some things that had taken place last year, and because of them, you really had to kind of really just tap into that calling that you had been, I guess, rejecting or denying for quite some time. So tell me about the moment that you really said, like, you know what, this is what I'm going to start.
Basically, like I said, I had lost both my parents, and my dad died in January and my mother passed in May. And so for a couple of months after, I was kind of I guess you'll say lost. I felt like purposeless, I'll say. um I had it, maybe for the last 2 years I had been very unsatisfied with nursing, but I thought it was just a phase, and I just thought, well, you just need to find a better job, and but none of that was really changing anything. And I remember Thanksgiving, I was very depressed. I was really sad because that was the holiday for me and my parents. And so I just was sitting there thinking about everything that my parents didn't get to do. That was one of the things. My mother, she was very much in isolated and in a homebody. She never ever traveled, never did anything. And it just hit me like life, it comes and it goes, and you're just sitting here not doing what you're passionate about. You need to just go ahead and take the chance and take the risk and just do it. And so it was just, I can't even explain it, because it wasn't this major just like ooh moment. It just kind of just happened. It was just Thanksgiving. I was sitting in front of the computer and I was like, you know what, I'm going to start doing videos and I'm going to start speaking to women on online. So it actually started out as Lashunda Speaks. That's what the original name was. And so as I was doing it, I was like, God, everybody uses their name and speaks. That's just so it doesn't stand out. I wanted to be different. And as I was sitting at the computer, I was thinking about how I have always been able to balance. I've always been able to be a wife to my husband, a mother to my kids, still make time for my friends, still pray, make time for God. And it just hit me that I was really good at balancing, and the reason I was good at that balance is because I put God first. And so in that moment, I just thought women with balance, and I looked for the name and no one had it. And I was just baffled because I was like, God, how is that possible that no one would have something to me that sounded so simple as women with balance? But it was in that moment that I recognized that it was actually him telling me exactly what to do. That's why no one had it. That's why it was simple and effective, yet no one had thought of it.
Great. So thank you for sharing that part of your story. So when you started like that very first video, what is it that you were led to talk about?
I actually talked about my experience. I talked about what I just said. I talked about, that life was fleeting and that we needed to really follow our calling and follow our purpose. And that basically that I was going to jump out and do it scared. Told people in the video, I'm nervous right now, but I'm going to do it because I believe that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And it just blew my mind, the response that I got, how many people needed to hear it, how many people needed to hear do it scared, that it's okay to be nervous and to step out on faith and just try something.
Right. So after you started that first video, talk about kind of like the transition. Like you said, it's relatively new, but you have like 11,000 followers on Instagram. You have a book, you have a book tour. So talk about like the evolution of Women with Balance over the last few months, because it seems like it got pretty big pretty soon.
Yes, that's still tripping me out. So when I started this, I basically put forth the effort that I would if I was to go to work. So at work in nursing, you're taught to research and to find resources and educate yourself often, because the medical field, of course, is ever changing. Every day is something different. So I took that and said, okay, well, I'm going to apply this to women with balance. So I began to observe other influencers that I thought were great role models. I started looking at the way people formed their Instagram, how they did their Facebook. I began taking like free little master classes and just pulling these pointers from each, because of course, the whole masterclass thing, they want you to end up buying their training. But I didn't do that. What I did was I went to different ones and I just pulled little nuggets from each class, and I did my research. I would spend hours and days just on the internet trying to find ways of how do you blog, how do you create a community, what is analytics on Instagram. I really educated myself, and every time I learned something new, I applied it to see if it would work. And in the process, I just was myself. Well, I'm just very transparent. I don't mind sharing things with people that other people would probably be like, "Oh my God, why is she sharing that?" But I feel like that's the only way that people will really receive you and get the message you're trying to say if you be authentic and be yourself and be transparent. So I use my own personality along with educate myself, and that's to me what blew Women Will Balance It up, because I think a lot of people just start stuff and they don't really do their research. They don't really educate themselves. They think that they can just look at something and just mimic it, but that it's more to it than that. It's more to it than that with Instagram and with Facebook, and knowing how to engage your followers, things that I didn't know before, but because I understood that I didn't know it, I did everything I could to educate myself on it.
Great. And I'm definitely one of those people who has been to like everybody's webinar to the point where it's just like, I've been to so many that I just don't even register for anything that I think might be remotely like something that I've already seen. Because there is a lot of recycled information on the internet. But
Yes.
that aside, who are some of the influencers that you gravitated to when you were getting started and why?
One of them was Ty Speaks. Then, of course, Sarita Jakes. I liked her as well. Jeanette King. She's a Dallas influencer. But Jeanette King was probably my greatest influence because she's in Dallas with me, and I seen that she had like almost like 20,000 followers, and it made it realistic for me because it was like, oh, she's right up the street. So if it can happen for her, it can happen for me. Cuz I think that's where a lot of people get hung up at, because when we're looking at influencers, a lot of them are like really either famous or they seem like out of touch, out of reach, like that couldn't possibly happen for you. So to see some local people really doing it, and for her to one day she posted she was able to quit her corporate world, and funny or not, she's a physical therapist, she's in the medical field too. So when I seen that, and that's a goal of mine, to be able to just completely work for Women with Balance, for God. And when I saw that she was doing it, that made me realize this is a possibility for me too, because God is not a respecter of a person. So if he does it for her, it's possible that he can do it for me. And when it became a reality, that to me is what their influencership did for me. It became a reality for me.
Great. And I think that that's like how all of us should view it, is that there are always people around us who are able to do the things that we want to. And if we just study what it is that they do and kind of, switch it up with some of the resources that we have or add a little bit of our own flavor to it, we're going to be able to do it as well too. The
Right.
fact that especially in this day and age with the internet, you don't have to recreate the model. You don't have to recreate the wheel. You can just be innovative in other ways aside from the
Right.
main structure and foundation of how it's done, especially when you educate yourself over and over again on how to do it, and then just do it with what you believe is going to work best for your audience. So
Correct.
that being said, how do you think that you got that 11,000 followers? And I also know you have like thousands of followers on Facebook too. So how did you grow your social following so quickly? And why do you think people gravitated you so rapidly?
Okay. Well, I actually have the 11,000 is actually on Facebook, and I have about close to 7,000 on Instagram. With Facebook, I just did an ad. I utilized their ads, and I just posted this really good quote that I just thought of and said, hey, if you like this quote and you like what I'm saying, follow my page. And people just started following. It was really crazy. I can't even explain it to you because the Facebook literally blew up. Probably, I don't even think it was 30 days. It just people just started following like crazy. And I'm like, where is this coming from? I still to this day, I don't understand it. And I really can't give you an explanation for it because I didn't do anything that I don't think anybody differently did. I just think that truly this was really my purpose, and it was God led. Like that's the only way I can explain it, because I didn't do anything that was out of the box to me per se that anyone else hasn't been doing. I just I to me, I think I have a gift for words, and probably always have, and I just utilize those words, especially when it comes to writing things and thinking things up. Like I can be just driving in my car and something will just drop in my spirit, and it's like, oh wow, that's good. I'm gonna use that. And that's just pretty much how I operate. And as far as Instagram goes, I believe that it's because I'm very engaged with my followers. I respond to them every time they say something to me. If they message me, I say something, I respond to them. I treat them just like they were my friends that I've known all my life. I think that's what really makes people gravitate to me, because it's just my natural personality. That's just who I am anyway. And I think that's just kind of the way you build your community. And I'm also very consistent. The main thing is that they trust me. They know that I'm going to post something to empower them at least 4 to 5 times a week. They know that. They know, they have come to expect that. They know that it's coming. And I think that the main thing that caused people to follow me was that consistency. I've been doing the same thing ever since I started, and I've not veered from it. And also the quality has improved. When I first started doing it, my quotes weren't that great. The pictures were just average, but I was really blessed. My husband got into photography and just happened to love it. He only started it because of me. And when he started it, that became another gift that we realized that he had. And so as he improved, of course, my pictures improved. And then I started finding other apps to make different quotes, and um, looking at different color techniques, and like I just kind of pull something from so many people. Like if something caught my eye, I would be like, oh, I like that, but I want to do it this way. And so I would just tweak it, and I would, instead of mimicking people, I would make stuff my own. I wouldn't take you don't take everybody's stuff they're doing. Like you said, you don't, you're not trying to recreate the wheel, but yet and still utilize stuff that people are used to on Instagram. They're used to a certain way your Instagram feed looks. So I applied those rules to it, but I just did it with a twist of what I thought would look good, or what I thought would be catching to the eye if I were to look at someone's page.
So it seems as though you took what you learned and you applied it very rapidly. Like we were talking about, not recreating the wheel, but going with what it is that you know and what works, and being able to just add your own flavor to it. Now,
Right.
another thing that you had also mentioned is your husband, and you talked about your family very early on. So kind of what has your family life been like since you started this? I'm sure that they were used to, mom being a nurse, or, your husband was used to his wife being a nurse and coming home from work after her work day and doing
I am
those types of
still a
things.
nurse. I still
Right,
work a
exactly.
full-time job.
Right. So what's it like now with you also doing Woman with Balance on the side?
It really didn't change much. I just stopped sitting in front of the TV on the couch and doing nothing else. We have a lot of time that we just, honestly and truly, we waste, that we could be doing other things. And also, when I lost my parents, I also lost a lot of friends. To be quite honest, I realized that I didn't have the friendships that I thought I had. I looked up and I was really alone in this, and all I had was my family in my four walls. And it was a lot. It was a very tragic incident, because I had already lost two siblings prior to my parents passing, and then the two siblings that I had left cut me off out of the inheritance. So, and they have not spoken to me since. So I had to grieve the loss of both my parents and what happened to my child alone with my family, my husband and my kids. And so at that moment, I realized how important not only they were, but my time was. And it was in that isolation that Women with Balance was birthed. And I realized how much time I was wasting on planning things to do with my friends that wouldn't show up or be late, and all the time I would take wasted chasing after them, or even honestly just complaining about the relationship. I used to hours on end whining to my husband about what this friend did and what that friend did, and instead of letting it go, and it was draining me. And when all of that was taken away from me, I realized I had a whole lot of time to do other things more productive. And that's what I don't think a lot of people realize, how much time they waste. I mean, you can get a lot of things done in just an hour or two in the afternoons. Like I told you when you called, when I come in, I'm doing a 30-day fervent prayer challenge at this time. So each day I blog on my Women with Balance, specifically things that we're praying about for that day, and giving people tips to help people's prayer life by the end of this challenge. And so as soon as I get home from work, a, I've always been a big multitasker. I can be cooking, blogging, watching TV at the same time. Like that's just me. My husband will tell you, when we first met, I told him I'm a jack of all trades, and that's actually a fact. Like, I'm a great multitasker. So I'm constantly doing stuff productive instead of just wasting time. And then when the weekend comes, I still have time to go and do things with my family, and do fun activities too, because I've prioritized and taken care of business all week long.
Really a huge dynamic in your work life balance. It seems as though it's really just a matter of you redistributing your time from doing things that are unproductive, or even in some cases unhealthy. Like you said, like kind of chasing down those relationships that you realize weren't even real, genuine relationships anyhow, and just
Right.
redistributing that time to doing something that's productive, that's helpful and healing for you, but also for other people as well.
Correct.
Great. So tell us a little bit about this book that you have coming out.
Well, the book actually released in January. The book's been out since January. It's called Clarity, Beauty, and Pain. I also have another book that's going to release, matter of fact, next week, but it's a co-author book. It's called Battle Scar 5. So that book actually has 50 different authors. We all wrote a chapter about our domestic abuse experience, and it's actually to help women in women's shelters who have just left those abusive relationships. That's one. But Clarity and Beauty and Pain is my book. It's my baby. I actually wrote that book the first time in 2011. It was published once through a publisher in New York that was a complete disaster. I had no idea what writing a book was about, publishing, marketing. I was a baby. I was totally green to it. So it didn't go anywhere. But I believe that maybe I jumped out and did it at the wrong time. I don't believe that was my time to do it. I believe I was always supposed to write the book, but there was more to the story that God wanted me to put in there. So the next time I decided to do it, and initially the first time I did it, I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do this again. It didn't work. I should just give up on it. But again, when my parents passed, it was revealed to me, no, you are supposed to write the book, and now it's your time. Now is the time for you to do it. So I rewrote the book, and I added more chapters of things that I had learned since 2011, which was a lot. I had no idea, like, it was that time frame was going to be that significant, or that many things were going to happen. Cuz as soon as the book released, my sister died. 2 years after that, my brother died, and so on. So it was just so much stuff that I needed to put in that book for people, for their healing. And so this was my time. And so I wrote that book for me, not just for people that were reading it, but for my healing, so that I could express myself and get some of the pain out, and just kind of, I guess I'll say, it was almost like my letter to God to kind of help me heal, like the whys I was going through it. because for me, that's probably why I became a nurse, because I need a rationale to everything. Like everything needs to be explained to me. I need to have an understanding of it. And for me to be able to healthily get through the grieving process from all the deaths I experienced, the Bible for me, God's word for me, was my healing. That was my way to understand the things that I went through, why I went through them, and how it was so that I could be used for God's glory.
Got it, got it. So, it seems like there's a lot, and even though it seems as though this is something that has grown rapidly, this is something that's been in you for years.
Yeah.
And there have been little attempts here and there to kind of bring it to the forefront, but it was really this moment in time, and it does seem like it's ordained by God that you really just were able to come out and just get it right.
Right.
Great. So I know that you talked a little bit about like your that all those things happening last year being a turning point in your life and kind of being like a pivotal moment. Is there any other things in your life that you would kind of attribute to woman with balance becoming what it is, or you becoming the woman that you feel as though you're becoming?
It would have to be my entire, honestly, it's my whole life. That's what Clarity, Beauty, and Pain is about. The book is about from birth all the way up until last year, because I experienced so many different things. I was molested as a child. I had my first child at 16, and he has Down syndrome. Then I turned around and had a second child. I was in a very abusive relationship. I suffered from low self esteem. I had no knowledge of my self worth at all. There were a lot of generational curses in my family. I was also adopted. Though the people that I'm speaking of was not even my biological family. I didn't even meet my biological father until last year. So I mean, I could go on and on. It's my whole life. I God has been preparing me for this moment since I was born.
Wow, I mean, that is a lot. You know what I mean? That is definitely a lot. And so, when you talk about being a Christian, this is something that I ask all of my guests who are either coming on as ministers or have a faith-based business or whatever it may have you. Were you brought up in the church, or is this something that you transitioned to later in life?
Well, my parents were very involved in church up until I was really young, so it wasn't enough to be impressionable. So I would probably say that I really found Christ because my parents they stopped going to church when I was probably about 6 or 7. We moved to from Dallas to this little town, and I believe what happened was they didn't have a church home anymore, and they just never looked for another one, which was weird because they from my understanding, my parents had been in church like their whole lives. But when they moved, they just kind of let it go. I think that my mother did try to find a church home where we were at, but it was a really small town, and the churches were not they weren't good like they were from the city that we came from. So I believe my parents just kind of just gave up, and then I don't think that they realized, or as parents realize, the importance of introducing your kids to faith at a younger age. And I believe that's why I struggled a lot throughout my adulting years and through high school, and a lot of the things that I went through and witnessed, because I did not have that foundation. But what brought me to Christ was that abusive relationship. I think that there was always some form of faith there for me, because I always I just could never give up. Even when I wanted to, even when I was just been like, I just really want to quit, something in me never allows me to do it. I don't care what I say. I don't care I don't care if I'm gonna give up today. I'm giving up. I mean it. It just would not. It just would not work. So I feel like he was carrying me the whole time, and I didn't realize it until that abusive relationship. He basically knocked me in a wall. He knocked me unconscious, and I woke up to my kids. My baby girl, she was probably about 8, and she had called my mother to to say, hey, Granny, mommy's not waking up. And so my parents drove. They were like an hour away. They flew up here and got me and took me to the hospital. And I think in that moment, like, I really realized I could have lost my life. And I I realized something was wrong. And a friend asked me to go to church with her. And I never forget it. It was a coworker, and I went to her church, really small church. It was actually in a storefront. It was probably only like 20 people there. That was like the first time I had been back to church since I had probably been about 6 or 7 years old. Now, mind you, my parents always made it clear that God, there was a God. They still prayed and talked about the Bible, but we didn't go to church. And it wasn't like, we didn't have Bible study or whatever, but I knew that there was a God, pretty like that. That I knew that much, but I did not have my own personal relationship with Christ until the experience of being in that abusive relationship, because it was God who really helped me out of that situation. And I just started to look back at all of the things that I had went through and how he carried me. And that's when the relationship with God really began, when I really began to understand, like, there was something bigger than me at play. And it kind of just evolved from there and blossomed from there. And I just remember every time I had prayed to him genuinely about something that I was going through, I was able to look back and see he was there, and to see why he allowed the things that he did to happen in my life. And so that pretty much is what created my Christian background.
Wow, that's just like an incredible story. I'm also in a similar boat where I did not grow up going to church, but it took me, a few traumatic experiences to really find Christ and start developing that relationship. So, that's why I always ask that question, because you never know how people's walk, and their coming to Christ moment and how that really impacts their life, especially whether or not they grew up like that or was something that they ended up finding on their own later on in life. So tell me a little bit about your expectations for this upcoming book tour that you're going to be launching. What cities are you going to? Tell us about some of the speakers. Tell us about what you're looking forward to.
Okay, so the I Am Healed tour is going to first launch June the 1st in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And then we're going to go to Atlanta in September, Houston in November. And then we'll pick it back up next year and hit Chicago, Brooklyn, and we'll end in Dallas, where I live and am from. So my expectations have changed, to be quite honest. When I first initiated the tour, it was really all about, let me get the book out here, because what other way am I going to get the book out? No one knows my name. Just posting it on the internet is not working. Even doing the radio shows is not really doing anything. So the only way I feel like people will really get the book in their hand is if they get to hear me speak and have a connection, a personal connection to me, and want to hear my story. So that was initially why I launched the tour. But then as I began to dig deeper and really understand that this was my purpose, I realized the tour was bigger than that. It's bigger than the book. At this point, I don't even care if people buy the book. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm more about, to me, the book was healing for me, and maybe that's all God wanted it to be. But what the tour for me is about is really helping women and their self-worth, and provide healing they need. Healing on all levels: grief, healing from low self-esteem, um doubt of God, helping increase their faith, get a relationship with God. So the tour has the purpose of it has totally changed from what I intended. And I believe it's because my walk with God is getting closer each day. As I'm helping other women, it's helping me be closer to God. And now he's putting into me, I believe, what he wants the tour to be about. And it's more about helping save souls. It's more about letting women know that they have someone out there to encourage them genuinely. And I went to a conference myself, and I kind of just watched how they moved, and I was able to discern that it was basically just a money pit. And I was like, that's not what I want for my tour. I want something genuine. I don't want to just stand up here and just be talking just so I can get people to buy tickets. I really want to make an impact. I really want to empower people. And from there, I decided to just ask, people if they wanted to go. I use social media and found some amazing people, including yourself, to be a speaker on the tour. So I'm really excited about it because I felt like I personally was the underdog. So I wanted to bring what I felt like were other underdogs with me, people that were hungry for it, people that were in a genuine place, because sometimes as people grow and evolve, they get so big that they become bigger than themselves and bigger than the purpose. So I wanted to grab people that were still there, people that were still wanting to really make a change and an impact in women's lives and weren't just doing it just for the money. Don't get me wrong, we are supposed to be blessed by what we're doing. You are supposed to get finances from what you're doing. The people of Christ are supposed to be blessed financially as well. But it doesn't have to be just about that. I believe that if you do the right thing, the money eventually is going to come.
Right. That was like the first really good career advice that I ever got, that money is just a byproduct of doing a good job of something you're passionate about. So yeah, I'm so excited to be a part of this tour, both on the Louisiana stop in Baton Rouge in June and then the later date in Atlanta. So I'm looking forward to it. I know it's going to be a blast. I know that there's going to be some real healing and transformation during those weekends too. So as we wrap up, tell us where we can find you online. We know that you have like this really rapidly growing social following. So tell us where we can best find you.
I am both on Instagram and Facebook as Women with Balance. Just that simple. If you type that in, you'll find me.
Great. And then to kind of end things, what is a piece of advice that you would give to somebody who is like you, kind of falling through your steps, somebody who's been hurt, somebody who has experienced a lot of loss and a lot of pain, and somebody who is unsatisfied with what they're doing and feels as though there's not a bigger purpose for them? What piece of advice would you have for a woman like that?
The best piece of advice I could give any woman is to forgive yourself and forgive them. I think if you do that, everything else will fall into place. You have to let go of the anger. You have to not beat yourself up, because for me that was the biggest thing for me. It's actually easier for me to forgive other people than it is to forgive myself. And I think that's a problem with us as women. We expect so much out of ourselves that when we do make a mistake or we feel like we've wasted time, we beat ourselves up about it. So the best piece of advice I can give for anything that you're about to do is to forgive yourself and forgive other people, because that's the only way that God can truly help you operate in your purpose. He can't do anything for you if you're harboring ill will and grudges. He just can't. And that's part of the healing process. Once you can truly forgive them and forgive you, you can move forward in everything else.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for being on the show. I do appreciate it a lot. And I know that our listeners are going to as well.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies.
And there you have it. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Go Getter Showcase. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and iTunes. Until next time, take care.